Ari, we are headed to Oxford, Mississippi to watch Georgia play at Ole Miss on Saturday. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. Great tailgate scene. Great everything. Question is, will it be fun for Jaxson Dart? Because he is coming off probably the most fun he's had all season against Arkansas. He threw for 562 yards. Excuse me. He threw for 515 yards. He combined for 562 passing and rushing yards. He threw for 5 touchdowns. He averaged 16.6 yards per attempt. I mean, it was as good of a game as a quarterback can have. 6 touchdown passes in that Arkansas game. As good of a game as a quarterback can have. And now he's about to play a defense that has been susceptible in moments, but also in its biggest must-win game, made a good quarterback look silly.
Yeah, so here's the thing. You got to outline you have to outline what you're expecting from Ole Miss in this game to begin with. Like, are you expecting Georgia to come in and show that it is in its own class in the SEC after failing to do so the previous weekend against Florida? Are you expecting Ole Miss to show you that their investment in the offseason was a worthy one, right? Like, this team has good players. This team should stack up athletically against Georgia. And I would say that Ole Miss is the best version of itself from a talent perspective, and Georgia isn't as deep as it's been in the past when it was winning national titles. So, Ole Miss came into the season with the understanding that they had a window here to try to capitalize on some things. It fell short against some teams that it shouldn't have lost to early, and now it has to win. And I think a lot of that's going to fall under, how well Jaxson Dart plays, and frankly speaking, how the offense is able to exist against an elite defense that does a good job of making teams look foolish at times. Like, so I just can't get Quinn Ewers out of my head and what they did to him in that game.
They put him in a pretzel, forced Sark to go to Arch Manning, who also got put in a pretzel, and they went back to Quinn Ewers. Like, Jaxson Dart can't afford for that to happen in this game. He's got to be better than the Texas quarterbacks were against this Georgia defense. And I think the last week or so should give him some confidence. So if we're looking at the Prize Picks numbers for Jaxson Dart, 277.5 passing yards is his square. And that's how you play Prize Picks. If you're not playing it yet, download that app, use the code Staples, play $5, get $50 instantly to play with. You're picking squares. You pick at least 2. The more you pick, the higher the potential payout. So for Jaxson Dart against Georgia, his passing yardage square is 277.5. And you have to decide, will he throw for more than that or less than that? Now, against Arkansas, he about doubled that up, which is just crazy. But most games, he's been kind of right on that. Trey Harris may be back for this game. Now, I think that's important. That's a huge addition, but also because Ole Miss finally figured out how to have a very effective passing game without him last week. Jordan Watkins went crazy. Trey Harris didn't end up playing, even though he did pop out in uniform right before the game started. Like, hey, maybe I'm going to give this a shot. I would imagine we will see Trey Harris try to give it a go against Georgia. We'll see if Caden Prieskorn, the tight end, can he do it? But Jordan Watkins is ready to go after that big game against Arkansas. With all those targets, I think Jaxson Dart has a serious chance to go more than I think he has to. Ole Miss needs this to be a shootout to win this game. If it's a slog, it's Georgia winning.
Yeah, I mean, it's also an opportunity for Jaxson Dart to, assert himself as a star in the sport, but also to put Ole Miss in a position where people take them seriously as a national championship contender, right? Like, I think that the majority of fans who have watched this team play just think they are a fraud, right? Like, I mean, if you ask a lot of people, though, the games that Ole Miss has lost this year don't bode well for that. But I do think that if your thought process coming into this game is that Georgia is just going to strangle them and that there's going to be no, fireworks or excitement, that you're probably going to be wrong. Like, the fact that the number is this high, I think makes you feel good in general of what they anticipate Ole Miss's offense is capable of doing, because that's a pretty high number just as a baseline, whether you're more than or less than.
Well, the other thing is when Ole Miss does well against good defenses, Jaxson Dart's legs come into play quite a bit. He's a much better runner than I think people give him credit for. So there's another Prize Pick square 300.5 passing plus rushing yards. And this is saying, I think Jaxson Dart is going to be an additive piece in the run game as opposed to getting sacked a bunch of times and having those yards subtracted from his total. So if you go more than, I think you're thinking Ole Miss is going to win this game because Jaxson Dart is running on Georgia, is throwing all over Georgia, and the points are being scored. And I don't like, this is not the Georgia team that they played last year. I don't know that like that Georgia team was as healthy as Georgia was all of last year. They had a healthy, at least at the beginning of the game, had the most healthy Ladd McConkey and the most healthy Brock Bowers combination that they'd ever had. And once they put their foot on the gas, it was over. Ole Miss had no chance. I don't know that Georgia's offense can do that this time. I think Ole Miss, because their defense is better than it was last year, and because Ole Miss has a lot more weapons on offense, I think they're in this the whole time. And so Jaxson Dart's going to keep on throwing.
Yeah. I got to tell you, Andy, I cannot wait to get there. It's going to be electric.
Awesome.
I've never seen a game there, and there are a lot of storylines for both teams here. It's like Ole Miss loses. We have a discussion about whether Lane Kiffin has done a good job this year. Georgia loses. We have a discussion about what they are this year and what they, where they stand in the playoff race. I would say that this is every bit as big of a game as the LSU Alabama game. It's just not at night, which Lane Kiffin will complain about.
It is as big of a game for Ole Miss. It's not for Georgia, which is also interesting because Ole Miss is back against the wall, wounded animal situation. They must win this or they are out of the playoff. Georgia doesn't have to. Now, if they lose this, they'll be in must-win mode at Tennessee next week or against Tennessee and Athens next week. But Ole Miss is in that mode now. I think that probably helps Jaxson Dart as well. So we'll see what happens. It is going to be fun no matter what.